When I came to America, I wanted to quit. I wanted to go back to Mexico. It was very new for me. It was very new to meet the man that claimed to be my father. I remember I started by saying, "Father, why do you like to see me suffer?" In my mind, I was like, "Oh my gosh, like God just spoke to me." I was like, "Oh my gosh, it's God." And the cop was coming, and I heard its footsteps just coming in, and I was crying. But his point is that I got so busy, I didn't put my family as a priority anymore. Dude, I went down. It was almost like I had like my why, I had my vision, I had my reason to like graduate and do all these things. And then suddenly that thing just died. It was really dark for like a month. She told me, "You didn't come this far to just watch her die and let it be in vain." Nowadays, a lot of people, sadly, when they feel stressed or anxious or some negative feeling, they turn to temporary pleasures, drugs, alcohol, even pornography. We need to ask for patience, for love, because it can't just come from us. It has to come from some higher power. Things can always be given to us if we ask and we act towards it, because naturally we want to focus on ourselves, and it takes more effort. It made me realize that when I turned outward and made people happy, it somehow psychologically, physically, and spiritually made me happy. Like, I'm never gonna talk to someone again, man. Like, that's what I get for being nice. Sometimes the reward isn't there on the moment. You can't see it right then and there, but the law will always bring a good consequence when good effort is present.
Sometimes, like, we reach outward and we try and do something nice, and it kind of comes back in our face, and we feel jaded. We're like, man, I'm not gonna do that again. What? I think the true spirit of turn outward is to love and to care, regardless of expectations, regardless of outcomes. Welcome to yet another episode of the Turn Outward podcast. I'm your host, Spencer Smalley, and I am so happy you're here. The reason I created this podcast is because I've worked in mental health care for nearly 3.5 years now, and I've noticed a trend that self-care philosophy is becoming increasingly more individualistic. We hear phrases nowadays such as, "You need to focus on yourself," "Do what makes you happy," "Live your truth." I want to challenge these assertions. I believe that living in a community-oriented mindset leads to healing and connection. I believe that looking to contribute rather than receive leads to meaning, purpose, and joy in our lives, in spite of all the negative things that happen in the world and that one can face in their lifetime. Because I believe this message is so important, I want to share it with as many people as possible. So if this episode has positively impacted you, it would mean the world to me if you could share it with others. You can follow the podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts and share an episode that you like to social media. Thank you so much again, and I hope you enjoy this episode. It's a big day. It's our first in-person interview. We have my very dear friend and former roommate, Julio Gonzalez. Julio, how you doing, bro?
So much better now that I'm with you.
Oh, bro. Oh, thank you, bro.
Yeah, man.
Julio is an amazing guy. Got to live with him for about a year. Yeah? Was it 9 months?
Yeah, yes, in downtown Provo with in Highline Square. Yeah, it was about a year. It's pretty much a year.
Yeah, about a year. And we shared a bunk bed together in a very small studio bedroom.
It was a rough time.
Yeah, it was a good time. Julio was on bottom bunk. I was on top bunk. You know, you'd think it'd be the other way around, but
He needed to be closer to God.
yeah, that's true. That's facts. Mad facts. No, one thing I love about Julio, he's a spiritual giant, giant among men. He's a little chaparrito, as they say in Spanish, but definitely a stud and an example for me. Julio, tell us a little bit about what you're currently doing with as far as schooling and career. What's going on in your life?
Yeah, for sure. I just graduated class of 2024 in Brigham Young University out of the marketing program in the Marriott School of Business.
Which is not an easy program, by the way.
It's not. It's really competitive. Matter of fact, when I got accepted, it was 300 and something, 19, por ahí. Also, just fair warning, I'm going to speak a lot of Spanglish here, so bear with me. But out of those 390, only like 112 got accepted, and then I was lucky enough, fortunate to be in there. But yes, I graduated in April 2024. It was great. And now I am currently finishing up my last few semester working at the MTC as a supervisor. And I'm pursuing a career in real estate.
Right. Yeah. One of the hardest workers I know is Julio Gonzalez. This dude really values his time and uses it very well. And very grateful that he's made time for me today, especially. He's got a lot going on. Sundays are typically a little more chill, but homie's gonna wake up tomorrow and grind, right?
Yeah, trying to wake up at 2 in the morning.
Man, I'll be waking up at 7, so I will not be waking up at 2. So, but awesome. Uh, Help us get to know you a little bit better, Julio. Tell us a bit about your upbringing, your background, where you come from, all that.
Absolutely. I am originally from this little town called Oaxaca in Mexico. It's down south. It's close by Puebla, by Veracruz, like 5, 6 hours away from Mexico City. I grew up there. For those of you that have never seen it or know about it, it's where they filmed the movie Nacho Libre. So there you go. That should give. Oh, and also where I got the inspiration of the Day of the Dead. It came from Oaxaca. So they also got that for the movie Coco. But I immigrated to the States when I was 11 years old. And before that time in Mexico, I grew up with my mother and my great grandmother. But when I moved to America, I was able to meet my father and immigrate with him to Florida, Jacksonville, Florida. Then during that time, I became a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I loved it, and then I learned English. I learned how to play the piano. I learned other skills. There's a couple of other rewards that happened there in Florida, which I was happy that I had the opportunity to work towards. But another highlight in my life was that I went and served a full-time mission in the California Arcadia area, where service volunteers go and they try to share the good word of God and also provide service in whatever way and means that we can. Then I came back and got accepted into BYU, and here we are now. But that's a little bit about myself. I'm very loving towards my family. I try to be loving towards my friends. You would notice I have a little bit of more tough love towards y'all. But yeah, I love boxing and Latin dancing, and so that's pretty much it. And I just became a fan of charcuterie, so that's pretty good.
Charcuterie, let's
Yeah.
go. Yeah, sometimes the Latino language is to roast each other, and Julio definitely shows his love through roasting me a lot and teasing me a lot. He keeps me humble. I'm really grateful for that. Um, so tell us a little bit more about what it was like growing up in Mexico and what it was like coming to a new country and all that.
Yeah, for sure. It was different. I remember that when I came to America and my father picked me up from Orlando. It's a 2 hour drive from Orlando to Jacksonville. I was very like amazed, surprised by highways. Like where I come from, there's no highways. Like it's just dirt roads, or sometimes there's paved little places. But yeah, when I came to America and I saw the highways, that surprised me a ton. Seeing McDonald's everywhere, it's a bit of a culture shock. Matter of fact, like I actually wanted to quit. I wanted to go back to Mexico after like just 1 year because it was very new for me. It was very new to meet the man that claimed to be my father. It was very new to meet my new family, my stepmom and my half brother. And very new to meet new friends, learn a new language, new school system, everything. So it's pretty difficult. But even in any type of scenario, when they ask me this type of question, I like to respond that the reason that I stayed was definitely God. Hmm.
Okay, so tell us a little bit more about that. You mentioned the reason that you stayed was through God. Kind of what was your experience kind of finding God and developing a relationship with him?
I think my youngest experience was when I was 4, 5 years old, I think. There was a time when my mom wasn't around. When I was young, she went to do different jobs around in Mexico. And so I stayed with my great grandma. And my great grandma would always take me to Catholic Mass, teach me how to pray, do all these things. So I learned the Padre Nuestro que estás en el cielo prayer. And there was a time when my mom decided to just quit her jobs and spend more time with her child. I actually don't know if I even told you the story now, I don't remember. But my mom came into my life and she took me and she decided to go back to her mom. so my great grandmother's daughter, and ask her for help. And she accepted and allowed my mom and I to sleep not in a room, not in the living room, but underground in the basement. And so we slept in the basement, couch and floor for a couple of weeks. And my mom had asthma. And I remember there was this time when we were sleeping and she kept on waking up and coughing. We'd go back to sleep and then wake up and cough. Same thing, it repeated, wake up, cough, wake up, cough. And then there was a time when she woke up and she didn't stop coughing, and she kept on coughing until she started turning like purple. And I freaked out. And I remember I was in my little, I think it was Spider-Man like undies. And I ran upstairs and I was like, Abuelita, like grandma, like please help my mom. They came down, they carried my mom, she was choking, and then they took her to the hospital. And then my grandpa like turned on the TV and he's like, then like entertain yourself. And when he played the TV, there was a movie playing, like just in like Fox TV or whatever, right? And it was Batman. And it was right at the scene where like Batman's parents die.
Wow.
And I was like, no manches. Like, I know my dad ain't here, but now I'm gonna lose my mom and I'm seeing this, man. I was bawling.
Yeah.
No, I was really worried. I was really scared at that time. And I remember that I turned off the TV, and I remember how my grandma would always tell me to pray. And instead of doing the Padre Nuestro que estás en el cielo prayer, I remember I just talked to God and I said, Father, I remember very well that I said, I will give you my everything, like my soul, but please save my mother. And yeah, she came back well. And when I came to America, I remember that episode. There's a time where I was frustrated with my stepmom, my little brother, and my dad, and I decided, you know what, I've seen enough movies to know what to do. I'm going to pack up my bag, fill it with fruit snacks, the greatest creation in America, with my scriptures and a science textbook. And I'm going to run over to the trains, get on a train, move to Texas, get off of Texas, walk to Mexico. I had it all planned out. I thought it was going to be, yeah, I really did. It was a sucky plan though, because I jumped the fence of my dad's yard and I started running, and I ran for the most eternal 15 minutes that I can remember. And I stopped at a Catholic church because, once again, my grandma played a big influence on me. And I sat there and I broke into the Catholic church. There was this giant statue of Virgin Mary that I remember. I sat there and then I had this feeling, Julio, why don't you pray? And I said, oh, that's such a good idea. Padre nuestro que estás en el cielo, santificado sea tu nombre, líbranos. And I started doing the Catholic prayer. And I finished and I was like, oh my gosh, like I feel so much better. That's awesome. But then I had the second prompting a second time. But it emphasized, Julio, why don't you pray the way the missionaries have taught you? So I left my stuff next to the big old statue of Virgin Mary. Hey, cuídamelo, take care of it. And I walked over to a little field and I knelt down, and I remember I don't remember everything that I said, but I do remember how I started. I remember I started by saying, Father, why do you like to see me suffer? Why can't I just have a mom and a dad and that's it? And then I poured out my heart to God, and I remember by the end of the prayer, I asked, can I stay? Or can I please go? But you tell me. And then I felt the prompting to open the scriptures, and I went and I just opened the scriptures, and I will never forget where I landed. I landed in the Doctrine and Covenants, section 121, in the verse 7. And to summarize, it says, my son, peace be unto thee. Thy pains and thy afflictions shall only be for a small moment. But if thou endure it, well, thou shalt triumph. In my mind, I was like, oh my gosh, like God just spoke to me. But then like 3 seconds later, I was like, nah, there's no way that God just spoke to me. Like, nah, para nada. And so I closed it up and I went back to the little spot that I was going to sleep in when I heard him, man. Woo! Cops came in. They saw me, and I was like, la bestia. So I grabbed my stuff and I start running, and then they get on the megaphone and they go, son, stop right there. And I just read in the scriptures that it said, my son, and this guy said son. So I was like, oh my gosh, it's God. And then I remember that I I just got down on my knees. I put my hands behind my back, and the cop was coming, and I heard it's supposed to dun, 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 just coming in, and I was crying. And the cop bends down, and he goes, "Are you Julio?" And then I thought, oh my gosh, there's no way that this guy ain't God. Like, he knows my name. And then I go, yeah, Julio. He goes, your father has been looking for you all night. And that to me made the difference. I was like, huh, in serio? Like, really? And I get up, and he puts me in the back of the car, and he drives me over. And my dad was on the phone with someone when we drove by. It was like a 3-minute drive. So my 15 minutes that I ran for nothing. And then we pull over, and I see my dad, and I can't hear what he's saying, but I could see him, and he did this. He said, and that to me meant the world, man. That to me was like a little I love you that I needed to hear. Um, and I remember that the cop dropped me off. He said nothing was going to be on my record. He was like, you have a very good kid, but I'm a little concerned. And my dad's like, why? He goes like, he had the Bible and the science textbook like right next to each other. Like, what's up with that? And so he was concerned that I was having an existential crisis. But I remember me and my dad stayed out there in the front yard for a little bit, and we had the most awkward like 30 seconds of our lives just standing there. Like, no one knew what to say to each other. And then my dad, after a moment of silence, said, Mijo, do you want to go get ice cream? And I said, yeah. And we went and got ice cream. And he had a heart-to-heart conversation with me. And he told me, mira, mijo, like, if you want to go back, you can go back. But I want you to know that I want to be there for you. We had a beautiful heart-to-heart. And I chose to stay. And every year that I've been here and that I followed through with that little experience that I had. I mean, I'm not rich. I'm not like monetary wise. I believe I'm rich here, and in my heart. But from every year that has passed and all the things that I've learned, and meeting people like you and all my other beautiful friends, I feel like that promise is coming to pass, that I will triumph. And yeah.
Oh, that was beautiful. Thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that story. Take us through kind of you're about 12 years old then?
Yeah, 12, 13.
12, 13. Okay. So you go forward, right? You go to high school in Florida.
That's right.
Okay, what's that experience, right? Because you're still like learning English, you're still getting accustomed to the culture. What was that like for you?
It was wild. And middle school was rough. 6th and 7th grade, worst years of my life. I had no idea what was going on.
I can relate to that.
Maybe everyone can relate to
Yeah.
that. But yeah, no, I didn't know what was going on. But you know what my dream was, man? My dream back then was to ride a yellow bus and have a locker.
Wow.
Because back in Mexico, that's like era todo lo que veíamos. It was all we saw in
That's
the
how they
movies.
portrayed it on like
Exactly.
TV, and so you wanted that typical
Yeah,
American
so that's what
high
I
school.
wanted that. I didn't have it 6th or 7th grade. All I had was like bullying and teasing.
Mm,
But then 8th grade, I got accepted to High School of the Arts for playing the piano. I mean, sorry, Middle School of the Arts. And that year, 8th grade, best year of my life. I was able to ride a yellow bus and have a locker. It was
man.
amazing. It was great. Um, but high school, high school was okay. I feel like I was my father's guinea pig because my father himself didn't know like what the school process was like. But I had to go through it. I don't know what ACE classes, what AP, international, all these things. I have no idea what any of those things were. Um, it was hard. It was definitely challenging, but it allowed me to stretch, to make connections, and more than anything, have a lot of leadership opportunities. It allowed me to see that I can be a leader. And it was hard because like I didn't expect me, nor people expected me to be a leader coming from like way yonder. Um, I'm making it sound like it's like Australia or something, but
Yeah.
um,
Down under.
yeah, for real, de verdad. But that's definitely what it did to me, and that wasn't really a rough period of my time. It became a little more rough when I started like going into my mission, into that LDS mission.
Okay, so talk to us a little bit about that transition.
Yeah, for sure. Um, when I was filling out my papers, it was my senior year in high school, and I remember I gave it all. Like in Spanish, they say le echarle las ganas, like le eché todas las ganas, and that's because my great grandma said, like, I want to see you graduate, and I want to, you're gonna be the first one in the family, and all these things. And I busted my behind, put myself in so many extracurricular activities. Point is that I got so busy, I didn't put my family as a priority anymore, and I stopped calling my great grandmother. I stopped calling my mother, because I just put my head down and I just kept on working. Months before graduation and final exams in high school, my mom called me. I remembered it was in September. It was during a an eclipse because my dad and I were watching. I believe it was September 21st. My mom calls me, and after cussing me out and asking me why I haven't called, she informs me that my great grandmother was passing away. She was supposed to die on a Friday. Um, Everyone said their goodbyes on that Friday, but she lived on Saturday. She lived on Sunday, and then Sunday she started mouthing something that seemed very familiar to everyone, and it was Cesarito. ¿Dónde está mi Cesarito? Which is Caesar. Where is my Caesar? And that she called me Cesarito, and they were like, "Oh, she's waiting on him." And so they called me, and it was really really hard, man. But I got on that phone call and I told her how much I loved her. I told her, I reminded her of things I remember to this day. How I told her, like, oh, abuelita, ¿te acuerdas cuando veíamos Bob Esponja? Like, remember when we used to watch SpongeBob and your telenovelas and all these things? I remember hearing her chuckle. I played her one last song on the piano, and 3 minutes after that phone call, she passed away. Um, Dude, I went down. It was almost like I had like my why, I had my vision, I had my reason to like graduate and do all these things, and then suddenly that thing just died. And so I didn't really see a purpose on graduating anymore. I didn't really see a purpose on like waking up as early, on doing all these extracurricular activities. So I stopped. Grades went down. I stopped playing the piano. I stopped serving in the church. And it was really dark for like a month. One day my stepmom walks in the room, and I was crying, looking at a picture of my great grandma. My stepmom walks in, and then I guess she was done with it, but she tells me to stand up. I stand up, and I was crying. She grabs me by the shoulders, and in Spanish, the translation is she told me, "You didn't come this far to just watch her die and let it be in vain. So get back to work and finish what you started." And I did. Got my grades back up. You know, picked up my slack with all the other things that I had, graduated, and I remember I grabbed the last picture that I took with her. And I don't know if you know, but like when you graduate, they just give you the little container. They don't give you like the paper. So when they took a picture of me, I opened up the little diploma container and I put her picture there. And I did that too when I just graduated from college. But yeah, that's pretty hard. And then when I started my mission, a lot of my family in Mexico was really against it. They didn't want me to go. They were like, "That's a waste of time, money, and your brain. Like, go study medicine." And they started using the death of my grandma as almost like a crutch. They were like, "Oh, she would have wanted you to do this. She would have wanted you to do that." And I had another beautiful experience that I'm gonna keep to myself as to why I decided to like go and serve a mission. Because there was a time when I was like, "Oh, you know what? Maybe they're right." But I went to the temple, and I had a beautiful experience there. But in my mission, all those tribulations happened. And then what really hit it was the death of my cousin. Uh, my great grandmother, she raised me, but she had another son who had a child that he didn't want. And so that child, my cousin, was also taken in by my great grandmother. So she raised us both as like two little stray puppies. Um, and he was shot in while I was in my mission. And my mom again was the bearer of bad news, and she came and told me And that also shook my world a little bit.
So obviously you've had a lot of like really impactful things that kind of, for most kids would kind of throw them off, and like really kind of confuse them and kind of create confusion as to their identity and kind of like what their purpose was. It sounds like you kind of found that identity through your relationship with God and also, the people around you, when you were talking, the question that came to my mind was a lot of us, we sometimes when we have motivation to do really good things and to make something of ourselves and to grind, to work really, really hard. Sometimes, like you were saying, like we become so involved in work and school and all these things that we forget about our loved ones. We forget about the relationships around you. What has been kind of some secrets or some things that have helped you find that balance in between like working hard and being involved, but also like giving time for those relationships and growing those?
It's a very good question. Something that really helped me is understanding what I value in life. After that experience with my great grandma, when I didn't call them because I was too busy, I kind of learned that's not something that I want to ever experience again. I have one last grandma, and I try to call her every week, every 2 weeks. But a balance definitely is understanding when my body needs, or my mind needs, per se, a break or is going through a struggle. I know that nowadays a lot of people, sadly, when they feel stressed or anxious or some negative feeling, they turn to temporary pleasures. For example, sometimes it can be drugs, alcohol, even pornography. But whenever I feel that way, I find that and take that a time to maybe call home. And it's those times whenever I'm like really tired, um, really worried, confused, that I call back. And I also remember, like I said, my values. Like my first one is my vision with God, and then the next one, it used to be my work and my future, but now I've changed it for my family. And so I try to call my family whenever I feel those emotions, and even when I feel good too, because when I feel good, I know that those are people that I want to share them with. Um, but something that's also helped me is asking for love and asking for patience towards family members, because we all have family members that are really good, and then we also have some family members that are the aunties that always ask every Thanksgiving, y la novia, and the girlfriend, or um, and so we need to ask for patience, for love, because it can't just come from us. It has to come from some higher power, whether it be God, if people believe in God, or the universe. But things can always be given to us if we ask and we act towards it. And so that's what I found has helped me so far.
No, I love that you said that. I think there might be some listeners who maybe are struggling with addiction, right? You
Yeah.
mentioned some of those temporary pleasures. I've noticed this in my own life and also working in addiction recovery right now as a counselor. The moments when we are most emotionally vulnerable, that's when we're most likely to relapse, right, in
Right.
addiction. And so whatever vice we may have in our life, be it drugs, alcohol, or pornography. So it sounds like what you're saying in those moments when we're most tempted to maybe return to bad habits or to relapse or to kind of emotionally numb ourselves with vices, that's when we need to most focus on other people and reach outward.
Yes. No, 100%. That is one of the main things that the Savior also did. And no, that's also one of the things that you should do. But it's hard, man. It's hard.
Mm.
It's not an easy thing to do. And it's because naturally we want to focus on ourselves, and it takes more effort to um, put off the natural man, per se, and become a saint through God. Um, there was a scripture that we talked about today in church because it's Sunday. Um, I believe it was Mosiah 12 verse 26. And it said, can I pull it up?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. In that scripture we were learning about Abinadi, King Noah, and Senaph. Oh yeah, 27 verse 27 for the public. Um, but it says it's when Abinadi, a prophet of God, a teacher, is helping the king and the people understand why they have had such negative outcomes. He says, it's because ye have not applied your hearts to understanding. Therefore ye have not been wise. Therefore, what teach ye this people? Keyword is applied. You have not applied your hearts. In Spanish, aplicarse, like when your dad tells you, hey, aplícate, like it's like pay attention, like do your work, like work hard, like do your thing. It takes effort to apply yourself to something, man. Like right now, I'm doing the real estate course and whatnot. And it takes effort to like wake up a little bit earlier or work a little bit later, say no to certain things. It takes effort to apply yourself, and so it will take effort to turn outward. But the reward is so, and I was talking to my brother about this yesterday, the reward is always great when effort is present. It's a lot, like we're going to get a reward for it. The concern is about starting. It's about starting to apply yourself. The moment you start to apply, the moment you start to show just a little bit of effort, it almost becomes like your new hustle, your new game. In a way, your new addiction.
Yeah. Wow, that is so cool. And a question that I was wondering personally is, obviously since I've met you and known you, you've been a very like extroverted person. Like
Sure.
you're always like you're talking to people on the bus, you're talking to people in class, anywhere you go, you're kind of reaching outward, trying to make new friendships and connections. Do you feel like that's just kind of the way that you've always been? Do you feel like you've always been kind of more extroverted and friendly, or was that something that you like had to apply effort to?
I had to apply effort too, man. It was definitely not something that I was born with. Props to all those people that are. It may seem that I was born with it, but no. When I was little, I was very quiet. My dad says that I used to have this condition, and it made him really sad, where I would try to smile, but I couldn't. That it would be almost like an awkward, forced, scared smile. And I remember I was very quiet when I was little. I was very reserved. I kept very much to my own because I was always seen as the odd kid who didn't have parents or whatever, right? Even when I came to America, I was still quiet because I didn't know how to talk. And um, yeah, I was very much to my own. I'm trying to remember when. Oh, I remember my father. When my father was trying to teach me English, he had this strategy. He would take me to his job from 9 in the morning all the way to 5 p.m. And he wouldn't feed me 2 meals on purpose. It would be so by the end of his shift, he would take me to wherever he wanted. Wherever I wanted, sorry. He would give me his credit card and he would say like, okay, ve y ordenate comida. Go and order yourself food. And I had to order it in English. So it forced me to like get out of my shell and be like, um, one burger.
And you're hungry
Yeah,
too.
yeah, exactly. So that definitely helped me to it. But you know what? You know what really made me want to be more extroverted? It's making people happy. I don't know what I did, but at some point in my young life, I made someone laugh. And then I made a group laugh. And it made me smile when I saw other people smile. It made me realize that when I turned outward and made people happy, it somehow psychologically, physically, and spiritually made me happy. And it's definitely something that I applied. And it can still be hard sometimes. For example, a couple of weeks ago, I was coming back from work and I ride the bus. I was riding the bus and I saw this girl, 25 years old, right? She was sitting there and she had her eyes so puffy and it seemed like she was just crying. And I had this moment where I was like, oh man, I want to, talk to her and tell her that it's going to be okay. But that's kind of weird. Like, but I remember I told myself, okay, like if she's still there by my stop, then I'll do it. And then my stop reached and I got up and I went up to her and she said, and I said, hey, listen, I don't know what you're going through right now, but I just want to let you know that, people are looking out for you. You're an amazing person and it's gonna be okay. And then she goes, please don't talk to me. And then I was just like, okay, and I left.
Wow.
Yeah, and so, like I remember I walked back home after that. Like I got off the bus stop, I left, and in my mind I was like, like I was like saying my things in Spanish in my head, and I was like, I'm never gonna talk to someone again, man. Like that's what I get for being nice. And then I went to Colombia like a couple months after that, just a family trip. Um, and I remember I went and worked out, did a run outside in Colombia, and when I was walking back to where we were staying, there was a lady that was carrying a big, and this lady was short, like shorter than me, if you can believe that. And she had this giant bag that was twice her size, and she was carrying it on her back, carrying it on her back. She was all hunched. And I remember I walked by and I was like, oh, I should help. But then I was like, nah, I'm going to go through the same thing that I went through with that girl in the bus. And then I had the prompting and like, no, go help her. And I was like, no. I like kept on fighting with myself. But then at one point I was like, no, you know what? This is what Julio would do. And I went back and I was like, hey, hermana, like, déjame ayudarle. Like, let me help you. And she let me help her and it felt nice. And like I said, like the effort, sometimes the reward isn't there on the moment. You can't see it right then and there. But the law will always bring a good consequence when good effort is present. Yeah.
I love that. I love that you shared that story, especially because I think so often we think of, my friend Chris talked about this too, is like transactional relationships. If I do something good or I try to like turn outward or reach outward to someone else, I should get something back from that. Mm. You know, we expect, oh, like I should get this feel good feeling and it should be like this, you know, just happy, you know, fairy tale ending, you know, with some moral of the story. And so sometimes like we reach outward and we try and do something nice and it kind of comes back in our face and we feel jaded. We're like, man, I'm not going to do that again. What? Like, but you never know. One, you never know what the outcome could be. It could be that after that interaction, the girl was really grateful that you had said something to her.
Perhaps.
Maybe it didn't hit her in the moment and maybe that was what she needed to hear. You know, you don't know the end story of that. But also like what it does to you. You know, you're not looking for some reward, but you're looking to give, right? And that's the whole spirit of turn outward, because Jesus, like, he went about serving people that never were grateful, that never said thank you, people that like cursed and disrespected him even when he did good, you know, but he still did it. You know what I mean? And so I think the true spirit of turn outward is to love and to care regardless of expectations, regardless of outcomes. I love that you shared that. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think one thing I also want to ask is, since you've been in college, you've been teaching a lot, right? And I asked this to my friend Chris as well. What have you found about teaching that helps you turn outward? Or what is it about teaching that has taught you more of what it means to turn outward?
Yeah.
Because you also work with a lot of missionaries, right?
I do.
Yeah.
I do.
Which, you know, missionaries, that's one of the main, the talk that this podcast is based on was a talk given to missionaries, you know? So they're the ones that you're trying to get to turn outward. So what has that taught you?
I think that talk that you're talking about is by Elder Bednar, the character of Christ, I think it's called. When it talks about like turning outward. Yeah, they show that to missionaries every time they come into the MTC. But what it has taught me, this is gonna sound maybe a little bit cringe, maybe not, or cheesy per se, but there's a song by Phil Collins in the Tarzan movie.
Let's go.
Yeah, that says in learning you will teach, and in teaching you will learn.
That's in Son of Man, right?
Yeah, Son of Man. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I'll use that as the song for this.
Yeah, we can put that in the intro. There we go.
Yeah.
That'd be hype.
Yeah. But I think that's what it is. In teaching, in sharing, I have also learned and gained. It has also been proven psychologically and mentally that the more we practice sharing something, the more we retain it, and the more we understand it, and the more we can like almost come up with better ideas on how to make that better, innovate it. The better we can be at innovating it too. And in me sharing the gospel still, and me teaching and loving those missionaries, I have also learned with them. Every single time I go to a classroom, I don't want to be a liar. I haven't done it every single time, but most of the times I go in a classroom, I always mention, instead of saying like, "Oh, missionaries, I'm excited that you get to learn from me," I say like, "Oh, missionaries, I'm excited that we get to learn together," because everyone has valuable things to share, and we are able to learn beautiful things from everyone, even the most, I don't know. There's just I remember when I was in my mission, sometimes the homeless guys would speak to us, and sometimes they would share some interesting things. Other times they wouldn't, but I believe that everyone does have something to share, and when we share those things, sorry, we can grow together. I remember my grandma, the last one that I have left, Felipa. She shared with me an analogy about the hand and money. She said, if you have your hand and you have money, and your hand is closed, none of your money is gonna leave. But don't expect any money to come to a closed hand. She said, but with your hand is open with money, some of your money may leave, some may fall, but money will always return to an open hand. So it is with love. So it is with turning outward. Not like your friend Chris said, having a transactional like, oh, I give you this niceness, you give me more niceness back. But it's the law of attraction. We give out that goodness and we're naturally attracting more goodness. You share, you teach, and in that you will learn, and it will attract you with more learning and gain. It's almost like a little cycle. It's not imaginary, but an invisible cycle.
Yeah, it makes me think of the scripture. I was thinking about this in church today, actually, where it was like, inasmuch as ye have done it unto the least of these, ye have done it unto me. I think our society, there's a push to, to make others feel seen, and there's a push for inclusion, which I think are good things, but I still think there's very much like a social hierarchy in society, right? We judge people's value based on their attractiveness, based on their socioeconomic status, based on their following, especially on social media nowadays, the amount of clout they have, all these different things. And we may look down on people that we don't deem as attractive or socially attractive as us, or as cool as us, um and I've noticed this, especially at church, and I'm going to try and be careful with how I say this, but some of the people that you meet at church aren't necessarily people that I would choose to like hang out with or be friends with, right? And the natural man in me would want to say, oh, this person's like weird, this person's awkward, this person's like super nerdy or cringe or whatever, but the church kind of like forces you into like a community with these people, where we're all equal. Absolutely. And it's not about attractiveness. It's not about like how cool you are, how many friends you have. Unfortunately, sometimes people have experienced negative experiences at church where they are kind of socially ostracized, right? But that's not the Lord's intent with creating a community, right? It's to, no, you need to learn how to view these people as no worse than you and no better than you also.
Absolutely.
And I also talked with Chris about comparison, avoiding comparison. and how comparison coupled with shame, that's when it becomes detrimental. And that's shame either about ourselves, when we're shaming ourselves, but we also compare ourselves with other people and we shame them.
Yeah.
You know, we think, oh, like someone's like giving a comment in church, or someone's like, you know, trying to talk to you at church, and you're like, oh, this person's like
Yeah.
so weird, you know? It's like, you know, you're shaming them. And so Christ is trying to like get us to realize, like, look, none of that matters. Like all these things that you think that matter in the world, they're not important, right? And so how do you think that, you know, we can overcome those kind of thoughts and to not view people as less or inferior to us?
Taken back to a book called The Greatest Salesman in the World. And in there's some self-affirmations that it recommends one to do in different situations, like when you're sad, when you're upset, when you're happy, when you're feeling proud. And one of them is, I can't remember off the top of my head, like word by word, but I'm just gonna paraphrase. It says, "When I feel like I'm higher than the sky, I will look up at the sky and look how far the stars have gotten, and remember how little I am." There have been times where I felt really proud of like my achievements and stuff. Um, and you know, it creeps into your mind the thought of like, ah, pues por lo menos like I'm doing better than that person, or oh, like at least I'm have more friends. And this like comparison is a very interesting and tricky thing that can mess with our minds. Comparison is a thief of all joy, President Theodore Roosevelt said. And something that definitely helped me is that whenever I feel that happy, proud moment, I let myself feel it. I'm like, okay, yeah, that was nice. But then I remember, like, keep in mind and remember that I too failed at something once. And whenever, like, I see someone at church per se that is alone, or maybe isn't the normal or like the standard or the typical person that, like, you know, we see at church, for me, it's a little bit easy because for me, I remember how I used to feel like that when I moved to America. How no one would talk to me. I don't blame them. I didn't know how to communicate either. But just the way that made me feel, it made it feel sucky. And I think maybe not everyone has passed through what I've passed, but I think we've all experienced what it's like to be rejected in the playground, to maybe even be rejected by a friend, by a family member, by a loved one. Some of us may have even felt rejected by God. I think something that we can do is maybe remember that we're no higher than the stars. And maybe those times where we feel like, oh, like maybe that person isn't who I want to hang out with. You don't have to live with that person. You don't have to spend your whole life with them. Just be nice. And maybe remember those times where you yourself maybe felt like that. Oh, and that's gonna give you a little push to maybe even just saying hi.
What I thought about as you were saying is, like, in the church we constantly have the example of Christ to look forward to, like, and we're constantly going to fall short of that example. So like anytime that we ourselves think that we're doing something great or that we're all that, it's like, look to Christ, you know. And that literally, that's like the lesson that I was teaching in Sunday school today, is like, when pride comes in, when hubris comes in, we think that we can do something without Christ, you know, especially like in theologically speaking, we might think that our works lead us to salvation, and that through serving and turning outward and keeping the commandments and, you know, working really hard and being diligent and doing all these things, that's going to lead us to salvation, which is not.
No.
You know, King Benjamin in the Book of Mormon, he says, like, you could literally waste away your life in the service of your fellow man, yet you would be unprofitable servants. So it's like, it doesn't matter how much we do or how often we do it, we still are dependent. And I know that's more of like a Christian perspective, and everyone here might not have the same kind of religious perspective. So think of it from more of a scientific perspective, right? All of us are dependent on something, right? Did we, go and like find all the oxygen molecules and then make it so that our body knew how to like, take in oxygen and use that to give us life? No. Did we, pay for every single food that we've ever gotten in our life, when we were like 2 years old and, we got food from our parents or from whoever? Like, were we the ones that did that? No, the sun, we rely on the sun for life, So anyone and everyone is dependent in some way, right? And so that's something that you have to remember in order to be humble. It's like all of us is completely, utterly reliant and dependent on something in order to survive.
Yeah.
Or else we'd be done for, And so I think, we have the example of Christ who, his natural instinct when he's suffering is to think of others. Whereas you have the example of Lucifer, Satan. His natural instinct is to make other people feel bad like he does. Whereas Christ is like, no, I want to protect other people and look out for other people, Because sometimes misery seeks company,
That's true. I think oftentimes misery seeks company.
Yeah. We're tempted when we feel bad, we need to make someone else feel bad. We see that in relationships a lot. I work with, married couples in counseling, and it's like, my partner made me feel small or made me feel bad in this way, so I gotta like throw it right back at them, roommates, sometimes you get frustrated with your roommates, and it's like, my roommate made me like frustrated in this way, so now I have to like, make them feel bad. And it's like, no, it's like when we're most tempted to like feel frustrated and feel angry, it's like, no, that's when we need to focus on blessing rather than like getting even. It's not the law of Moses, it's not the eye for an eye.
Right.
Anyways, I'm kind of rambling at this point.
But... Oh, no. It's all good.
Any thoughts that you have on that?
I did have a thought that crossed my mind. It was on that same topic of like, how can we avoid it? I think it is helpful to remember, like I mentioned earlier, but something else that I think we need to remember is that someone that you really want to become, and is that thought really from you, or is that coming from something or someone else? Kind of like you said, right? Like we can become like containers of junk. As people dump their junk on us, we want to dump it into someone else and just diminish and make people feel worse. And so I think it really helps to kind of pause and think, is that really me thinking? Or is that something or someone that's affecting the way that I'm thinking at the moment? Yeah, that's the only thing that came to my mind.
Thank you for sharing that, Julio. I really am inspired by your story and just like everything that you've been through. I think that regardless of who we are and what we go through in life, we can have kind of like a victim mindset.
Yeah.
With everything that you've been through in your life, and maybe this can kind of be the last question to kind of wrap things up.
Yeah, for sure.
What have you found to kind of avoid that victim mindset?
Victim mindset, man. It's a real thing. It's very easy. It's very easy to be a victim. It's very, very easy to play the victim. But I don't remember who said this to me, But someone once told me when I told them like about my life, um, we kind of talked about it, and we talked about heroes and villains. Um, if we look at heroes that have lost their parents, um, we can see that something similar happened to a villain. They lost a loved one. Point is that you lose a loved one, but you are the one who chooses if your story is going to be that of a hero's or that of a villain's. What has helped me avoid the victim mindset has been reminding me that people are watching. People are watching, brother. Whether you like it or not, people are watching what you're doing. They're watching how you dress. They're watching how you act. They're watching how you behave and how you respond. Now, I'm not saying be a people pleaser and do what this person would have wanted you to do. Nah. What I am saying is, with the person that you are, is that the best type of person that you want to portray? You know how I am. You know how I act, and you know how I interact with my friends. But you also know how I am when I act in a reverent setting, in a focus setting, in a hard work setting. And in my mind, I think like, is that like the best me that I can give? If I focus on being a victim, because I've done it, I've definitely done it, and I think all of us have probably done it once or twice in our lives, because it's very easy to be a victim. But what I've noticed when I've done it is that my progress doesn't regress, but it stops. And rather of it becoming something good, it just stays as it is, and you stay a victim. Heroes progress, villains regress, victims stay stagnant. Victims. And I think that's something that I would give to the people. You know, like it's not a horrible, like, oh my gosh, you just killed someone type of situation to be a victim. But do think and do ponder, is that somewhere that I want to stay? Because it's not about if we're going to move on. It's about when we're going to move on. So you choose that time. We're all going to step through the path of being a victim. But it's the choice of when are you going to move out of that path. That can make a difference.
Yeah. I love that. There's a difference between being a victim, being victimized, right? And then being a victim long term, right? Because all of us are going to have circumstances that are unfair, happen to us in our lives, and it's what happens. How do we react when the storm comes? You know, I love that. Julio, thank you so much again for your time.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure having you on, brother. Much love.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.